Hello, we're continuing with the laws of Pesach, and we are on Tuf Ayin Gimel 473 Dalet. And today we're going to be talking about the Shankbone and the egg on the Seder plate. So the Shulchan Aruch says you're supposed to have Shnei Tavshilin, two dishes, two cooked foods on the Seder plate. Echad Zecher LePesach ve'echad Zecher LeChagiga. One is to commemorate the Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb that was brought when we had a temple on Erev Pesach, the night before Pesach, and the other is for the Chagiga. The Chagiga was a sacrifice that was also brought for the holiday of Pesach, and at the end of the Seder, one would eat the Chagiga, the Korban Chagiga at the Seder, and then would eat the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice at the end, because the Pesach sacrifice is supposed to be eaten when one is full. V'nogu b'basar rubeya. And the Shulchan Aruch says the custom is, so we have two dishes on the Seder plate to commemorate this, and the Shulchan Aruch says the custom is to use meat and an egg. Says the Shulchan Aruch, continues the Shulchan Aruch, v'habasar nogu she'ez zroa, and the basar, the meat, should be a shankbone, should be an arm. V'nogu shehabasar yetzli, and the custom is that the meat should be roasted. The reason is because the Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice that was brought in the temple, the way it was cooked, it had to be roasted. It couldn't be cooked in water. It had to be roasted, dry roasted on a spit. Al gechalim it should be roasted on coals. Vehabetza tia mevushalas, and the egg should be cooked in water. But the Ramah writes, Vehu adin tsuliya. He says the egg should be roasted. Roasted means dry heat. When the halacha says roasted, it means dry heat, and cooked means with water. And the Ramah says the custom is in our cities to roast the egg as well. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Zroa. Al Shem Zroa Netuya. So we're going to start, we did some of these Mishnah Berurahs before, so we're just going to do the ones that we didn't do last time. Zroa. Why do we use a shankbone, an arm? Al Shem Zroa Netuya. For a remembrance, for the outstretched arm, Shehira Kodesh Baruch Hu B'Mitzrayim, that Hashem showed in Egypt, right? We talked about the outstretched arm of Hashem, obviously not a literal arm because God does not have physical body parts. Misha ein lo zroa, someone who doesn't have a zroa, yikach shar basar, you could take other meat, af below etzim, even if there's no bone. So if you don't have a shank bone with some meat on it, get some meat, put a piece of meat on there. Kasva poskim de beinan she ma'at basar al zroa. The poskim say that you should have a little bit of meat on the bone, shouldn't just be a bare bone. Because the whole point is to remember the meat of the Korban Pesach. Yatzli, it should be roasted, v'lo mavushal, and not cooked. Zeicher l'Korban Pesach, like we said, al gechalim should be roasted on coals. V'af shehaya Pesach nitzah lechatchila b'shpud, even though the preferred method of cooking the Korban Pesach was on a spit. Mikol makom kevin she'ein nitzla ela b'shpud shel rimon shetareach lachzor acharav lefikach dailanu b'tzli al gab gechalim sheyotzin me'ikar hadin gam b'Korban Pesach. So he writes, if we want to do this in memory, in a remembrance of the Korban Pesach, well, the Korban Pesach was on a rimon spit, on this special type of wood. So why don't we go get a special type of wood and cook the shankbone on that? So the Mishnah Berurah says that would be too difficult, and really, according to the letter of the law, one could fulfill the mitzvah. One could even fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach by just roasting it on coals. Okay? The Shulchan Aruch held that the egg should be cooked because really, according to the letter of the law, only the Korban Pesach needs to be roasted, but the Korban Chagiga does not need to be roasted. That could be cooked. Oh, sorry. The Ramah is saying you could also roast the Chagiga. He's not saying you have to. But then he says that's the custom. The custom is to roast the egg. Litzlos habeya ve'asur lechol azroa b'layla. This is important. One is not allowed to eat the shankbone at night. The ein oichlin tzli b'layla. Avla beya avshi tzli mutter. She'ein iser tzli b'beya. There's a prohibition to eat roasted food at the night of the Seder. What's the reason? Because we don't have a temple, and we're not really bringing the Korban Pesach. And when one brought the Paschal sacrifice, one was only able to eat it in Jerusalem. Right, you were not allowed to eat the Pesach sacrifice of Ben Alpin. That's a prohibition of eating kachim outside of where you're supposed to. Also, we're not pure. So, but he says the egg that you're allowed to eat, that you could eat. According to this, one is prohibited for roasting the a shankbone at night, elam bod yom. You have to do it earlier in the day. Im lo shadaito la'achol l'machar be'oso hayom. Okay, unless you're going to eat the shankbone later in the day. Now he's talking about yontiv, that one's not allowed to prepare from one day of yontiv to the next. So really, you could roast the shankbone at night as long as you're going to, but you can't eat it at night because it looks like you're eating, sanctified food outside of the temple. But what you could do is you could eat it the next day. That's fine. Okay, so what should you do if you forget to roast the shankbone the day before Pesach? Then you could roast it at night, but you have to make sure to eat it the next day, but don't eat it at night. That's what the Magen Avram and the other Achronim say. Let's say with the egg, you forgot to roast an egg, so you want to do it now. It's nighttime already. It's Pesach time, and you don't want to eat it at night. You want to eat it the next day, so then you're not allowed to do that. Elam bod yom. Kasav the Chayadim writes, Ra al ha'maisa shezarkin azroa v'hu bizoy mitzvah u'mitzvah laniach b'yamtiv sheni b'boker l'toch hatzli shetzon liyamtiv v'ochlenaso. The Chayadim doesn't like the fact, since we're not allowed to eat the shankbone, so what do you do with it? So the Chayadim doesn't like the fact that people just throw it away, because we're like throwing away a mitzvah. It denigrates the mitzvah. So he writes that you should put it in the food that you eat on Yontiv Sheni. That's what he says, not to just throw it away. Okay, and with that, we finish Sif Daled. Wishing everyone a beautiful day.